Once upon a time, I was browsing the wondrous world of Goodreads and stumbled across a new release. Enemies to lovers? Darkling, is that you? Dark characters? Pre-order that shizzle. One book later.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Hi guys, look at that! A review! I would hold up the book right now if it wasn't for the fact that I left it at my parents' house because it does not deserve to be on my bookshelf. Usually when I film videos here, I sit down at the couch. But today I'm just gonna do a good old-fashioned standing up review. I need space to express my emotions. So let's talk about The Shadows Between Us by Tricia Levenseller. This is what one would call a Slytherin romance. It's about our girl Alessandra. She's not like other girls because she killed her boyfriend. You can say what you want, but that's definitely not like other girls, I hope. She's tired of being overlooked and she wants the kingdom to herself, so she decides to seduce the now sitting Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him so she can take over the kingdom. But of course, we can all see that they're gonna fall in love. Sounds cool? Yeah, I know. This book sounded right up my alley because I love everything that sounds kind of dark, morally grey. V. Schwab is my queen and Lee Bardugo is my god. And I'm here to tell you that if your reading tastes kind of align with what I was just talking about and this book was on your radar, spare your money. Just so you know, I didn't hate this book. I just found it to be incredibly disappointing, and because of that I have an overwhelming urge to scream, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. It's review time! It's review time! Hello friends! So I'm just here to let you guys know that this review is going to be spoiler-free in the loosest term of the word. I will not spoil any big plot points, but I am going to talk about some characters, so enjoy! Let's just start off with what I did like about this book. Alessandra, our main character, is definitely a different kind of main character. She is pretty feisty. She definitely just is there to get her own power and do things for herself. And not necessarily good personality traits, but it did make her feel like her own unique personality. One thing that we quickly learn about her is that she loves sewing and making dresses, which means that we get a lot of beautiful descriptions of every single dress that she's wearing, which I personally really enjoyed. I thought it not only added a little bit of quirk to our main character, but also I just love reading about like the beautiful clothes people wear in fantasy stories. The book had some pretty nice female friendships. When Alessandra goes to the Shadow King's castle, she has to kind of compete with all the other women there to gain his attention. It was very easy to turn that into a kind of like girl hate competitive situation, but Tricia Levenseller didn't do that, and instead Alessandra actually befriended some of the women there, and I really appreciated that. And I have to admit, this book just had a lot of tropes that I absolutely loved. For one, there's fake dating, which I'm always a fan of. Very quickly into the story, the Shadow King kind of notices Alessandra and decides to take her because he has to pretend to have a mistress. So throughout the entire book, they're basically fake dating so that the Shadow King can kind of keep this persona of actually having a mistress and doing everything that's expected from a king. It has the trope of being a kind of villainous romance between two villainous characters. The love interest is a kind of dark, shady person, quite literally, because the Shadow King has shadow magic, which means he has shadow powers surrounding him kind of all of the time. They're kind of those tropes that I think we all have, that no matter what happens, if a book has these tropes, no matter how badly executed they are, you're still kind of gonna enjoy it. Just quickly want to touch on the fact that this book is very kind of sex positive, which I really enjoyed. I really appreciated that. Alessandra is the kind of character that just likes to sleep around with a lot of guys, and the book is very clearly trying to give off the message that is fine. And in that it's very unsubtle, to the point that our main character literally acclaims into the room that she is a strong woman and that she can do with her body what she wants. Which, like, I agree with it, but could have been a little more subtle, you know? But I do want to say, and I saw another reviewer on Goodreads touch upon this as well, and I think it's a very good point, is that somehow this sex positivity is being used as an excuse almost for the main character to basically manipulate the guys that she's sleeping with, abusing their attraction for her to gain what she wants. And I think that's a little weird, giving off the message that if you criticize it, you're criticizing the fact that she wants to have one-night stands and do whatever she wants. But you know, sex positivity is not about then also using that to manipulate and hurt other people. I think the story really went wrong there. But now on to the bad things. The biggest problem with this book is that it wasted potential because of the bad writing style. First of all, this book had no subtlety. These characters just spill out their motives and internal feelings as if they're in a reality TV show. The Shadow King, our mysterious dark love interest, states quite literally that he just wants to take over the world, gain power, and rule over everyone. Like, is this a novel or an episode of Totally Spies? Alessandra just kind of word for word tells the Shadow King, even though she barely knows him, that she just wants people to be friends with her because that's the only way she's gonna feel accepted and that's the only way she's gonna feel good about herself. Just spilling it all out. Subtlety left to the chat. But where on one hand there's absolutely no subtlety, there's also no space for drama and more emotion where there is needed. For example, killing and murder is something that is quite the theme in this story. I mean, our main character Alessandra, the whole point of her backstory is that she killed her ex-boyfriend, but every time there's violence in this book or someone gets killed, it's just glossed over or just described in like 3 sentences in a way that makes me feel like, you know, you could just like go into it a little bit more and go into what it does to the characters and what's actually happening to actually drive home the impact. But on those kind of moments, Tricia Levenseller just was very distant in her writing. And that brings me to this book's biggest offender, actually maybe the second biggest offender, I'll get to that later, and that is the failed attempt at being dark. Just because you have a character with shadow powers doesn't mean your story is dark. I think just by the synopsis I gave you, it gives you the feeling that it's going to be a dark book. It's actually pretty light. Like, there are pretty dresses, picnics, a lot of court drama. Even though the setup for a dark book was all there. Like, we have Alessandra who killed her ex-boyfriend, we have a shadowy dark king. There's this whole plan of killing the king. Like, the setup is all there to turn it into a dark story, but it never goes beyond just that illusion of it being a dark story. And what I mean with that is she never actually goes into why maybe Alessandra killed her ex-boyfriend, how it happened, what was going on. A lot of the focus in this book is on, like I said, the picnics and the pretty dresses. It tried to be one of the emo kids, but it was actually just a poser in a prep. And I see through your lies. And then on top of that, there was also just kind of the failed attempt at creating anti-heroes. I have a theory on this. This is my first theory of the video. The thing with Alessandra and the Shadow King, who I think are both supposed to be anti-heroes, is the fact that they do bad things, but that's it. So I asked you guys on Twitter for the reasons you like anti-heroes. Is it either because you like to read about these characters that do bad things, you know, like it can be fun to just read about characters doing things that you're not normally allowed to do, or whether you like anti-heroes because you like the psychology behind it and you like to read about the reasons that made them do the bad things. And of course, I'm aware that the only people that answered that poll are people who follow me and therefore will probably more align with my opinions, but it was pretty overwhelming that almost everyone liked anti-heroes because of the psychology behind it and not just because they do bad things. And some of you also commented that the interesting part about the anti-heroes is mostly that they're morally gray and not just either good or bad. But I do think this is interesting because I personally really fall on the side where I like anti-heroes because I like the psychology behind it. I don't like reading about characters doing bad things. I like reading about what drives these characters to do the bad things. And with Alessandra and the Shadow King, we never really learn what drives them. We never really... There's a dog barking. And with Alessandra and the Shadow King, we never really learn what drives them. We never really learn why they want all these powers. It's just kind of presented as that's just how they are. They do these bad things. But I'd like to know more about what's going on in their minds. And this problem is also strengthened by the fact that the writing was so unsubtle. So there was just no mystery around these characters. Behavior-wise, the story does have anti-hero characters, but I don't think it appeals to the anti-hero loving audience. So the bottom line of the first offending thing is this book tried to be dark, kind of failed at that. If you're looking for an actual dark book, I recommend Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Just shamelessly plugging one of my new favorite books here. My camera's about to die, so I'm just quickly gonna charge it before we move on to the one biggest defender of this book. So the one biggest defender of this book is just the failed romance. This is a dark fantasy romance, so romance is like one of the biggest parts of the story, but it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And basically the moment they meet, the Shadow King is instantly interested in Alessandra, so there is absolutely no enemies to lovers going on here. It's not even a hate to love thing, it's just they get along and they're basically friends right away. There's no angst, there's absolutely nothing that's keeping them apart except for quite literally the rule that they need to stand 5 feet apart from each other. This book really has its social distancing down. But as a result of that, the two characters barely interact for like 2/3 of the story, and it completely feels at building up any kind of romantic tension between the two. Now I will say again, I didn't hate this. It does get better towards the end when they do finally are allowed to touch each other for reasons that I won't spoil. And there are a few scenes that finally managed to kind of rake up the romantic tension, but it was definitely absent for the first 2/3. To me, it felt as if Tricia Levenseller was trying to create a slow burn, but the thing is, you can't create a slow burn if you don't ignite the romance in the first place. So that brings me to my second theory about why the romance failed so hard, and I will now ramble about why I think this book should have contained sex. Okay, so just hear me out, okay? I think this book would have benefited from not being YA and instead being an adult story, because to me it really felt as if this book was self-censoring. It has pretty dark themes lying around with killing and murder and darkness and seduction and things like that. But like I said, they're never really picked up. And I think if this book only allowed itself to just be more gruesome, be more violent, really get into the nitty-gritty with it, as would be allowed in an adult novel, then I think this book would have highly benefited from that. And the same thing kind of goes for the romance, okay? So here's my theory, you know? So usually when you're reading a romance, it's very clear from the beginning what the storyline is kind of building up towards. Plot arc for the romance subplot that usually comes up to a, well, I don't want to say climax, but like the high point. That can be like either their first kiss or the first time they have sex, or maybe even the moment that they get married. In YA, it's usually very clear that the whole romance is building up towards like the first moment, then they kiss, and that's kind of like the highest point and the tension is relieved, and then they're together and everyone's happy. But in adult novels, usually it builds up to something more than that. And in The Shadows Between Us, it's actually very clear that the romantic plotline is building up towards something more than just kissing, because the entire story is about seduction and lust, and they talk about sex with each other a lot. And even the moment that they finally have their first kiss, it's pretty clear that the tension has not been relieved yet. It's pretty clear that the romantic plotline is still going on until the moment they get down and diggity to it. But the problem is, the moment that arrives and they finally go do their things, it does the very classic YA cutoff where it's like implied that they're doing something but we don't see it, and the paragraph ends. And now there's nothing wrong with that, it happens in a lot of YA novels, but usually this is in the novels where the romance is clearly building up towards their first kiss, and then maybe later in a book other things happen, but this book was clearly building up towards that point and then not delivering it. I think either just write a romance that's clearly just leading up towards a kiss, or write a romance with an arc that's leading up to something more and then actually write it. And I don't want this to sound like I'm saying this just because I wanted the goodies. I'm just saying that if you're clearly building up towards something, then actually writing instead of leaving it out because it's inappropriate for YA, because then you're just subverting expectations. And that is why I think The Shadow Between Us should have been an adult novel. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I do have to say that I think that there are other authors that are very well capable of writing YA that is still very dark and is very good at leading up the romantic tension. So it is possible. Now that we have that out of the way, one other thing that I just want to mention is that this book is genuinely just kind of dumb in a comical way, as in there are like assassins in this book, and at one point an assassin literally jumps into the scene like an assassin that was like sneaking up upon someone. Like, come on. There is this whole thing about a character not being recognized because they dyed their hair. So yeah, anyway, maybe I'm just overly disappointed with this book because I had extremely high expectations, because it's kind of everything I've ever wanted in a book and no book could ever meet those expectations. Maybe that's it, or maybe this really just is not a very good book. I gave it 2 stars. I didn't completely hate it. I did have like kind of an enjoyable time, but I wouldn't recommend it. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope it was entertaining in some way, even if you haven't read the book, because that's always kind of the struggle. So that was it for this video. If you read this book, let me know what you think of it. Again, I didn't hate it. If you loved it, then I think I kind of really understand it. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon in another one. Goodbye.